I lay flat on the kitchen tile and kept my breathing small, like a field drill. The plate I dropped had shattered. If I twitched, I blew it. I had one job: look out cold. The house was quiet except for the fridge and the wall clock. The porch light was on because she likes the yard lit, says it makes the place look friendly. Our street is the kind where neighbors wave but mind their business. That helps when you need privacy, and it helps when you need a clean recording. No TV, no music, no dishwasher cycle masking the audio. 30 minutes earlier, I hadn't swallowed the dinner my sister made. I chewed, smiled, and slid most of it into a paper towel. When she turned to rinse the pan, I dumped the bundle, ran water, came back, and thanked her. A few sips of water for the act. Clear mind, no fog. First time in weeks. You're pale again, Victoria said. Long day at the base? Long week. At 8:22 p.m., I stood, reached for a glass, and let my knees go. I hit hard. A plate on the rack added a crack. I angled my head so my airway stayed open and softened every muscle. Mandy! Mandy! She slid beside me, fingers on my neck, then my wrist. Practiced. That used to comfort me. I didn't blink. Her hand lifted. Footsteps. A cabinet clicked. A phone vibrated on the counter. She picked up. It's me, she said, and the concern vanished. She's out. Took longer tonight, but she went down. A pause. Yes, I know the deadline. End quote. The only deadline I had was a progress review on a logistics system. It did not involve our kitchen. I'll pull the files, she said. They're on her laptop. She keeps the finals off the network. Yes, it's all there. Transfer clears tonight, she added. 3 months was one thing. 6 is enough. 3 months was when my symptoms spiked. 6 was when I stopped making excuses. Call ended. She came back, touched my forehead like a caring sister, and whispered, "Sleep it off. Big day tomorrow." Her steps went down the hall to my office. The chair creaked. The laptop chimed awake. I pictured the lock screen and the short password I hadn't changed because typing a long one all day invites errors. I had changed other things. File names, folder paths, decoys mixed with real drafts. Inventory. Door 6 feet. Island 2. Purse on the chair. Phone at my waistband with a voice memo running since 7:50. I taped the volume buttons so a nervous squeeze wouldn't ruin it. From the office, keys clacked. A drawer opened. Glass tapped wood. I remembered the small unlabeled vial I'd spotted when I pretended to look for tea. Labels don't peel themselves. I drew air slow. When I was sure she was busy, I checked the room with a lazy eye roll. No movement in the doorway. Clock light steady. I flexed a toe to test nerves, then stilled. A vibration hit the counter. Then another. Her phone rang from the office. "Do not call me again," she said. "Text only." A chirp followed. She kept typing. A shard of plate sat by my elbow. The pattern had been clear on paper. Dinner here, dizziness, fog, dinner out, 0 issues. The clinic bloodwork said I was fine. The log said otherwise. Dates, times, symptoms. No story, just data. Budget file, version 5, she muttered. Where did you put it? I thought about standing up and ending this. Bad plan in a kitchen full of glass with a suspect who knows where the knives are. My job. Stay still, capture audio, avoid a panicked swing. The laptop fan spooled. A USB tone sounded. File copy clicks have a rhythm. This was bulk transfer. Chairs squeak. Footsteps to the kitchen. She paused at the doorway. I stayed slack. She stepped over shards, ran water, set down a glass, then went back to the desk. Proof isn't a feeling. Proof is a file name, a timestamp, a voice you can play back. She said, to herself, "Got it." A text tone pinged. "Payment confirmed." She read, too pleased to keep quiet. Sirens carry in our neighborhood. I heard them first. She heard them next. Her keys went silent. "No," she said. 3 beats. "It's nothing." The keys started again, faster. My phone buzzed at my hip. 1 word from a contact who knows I don't need paragraphs. En route. I didn't look. I kept my chest moving slow. Footsteps returned. "Mandy," she said, testing. A plate shard scraped. "You should wake up now." I didn't. She crouched close. "You're fine," she said softly. "You just need rest." She stood. The chair rolled again. The drive noise picked up. In 6 months, she had played the caring sister daily. She cooked. She cleaned. She told me I pushed too hard. She told me to let the promotion go because health matters more than ambition. Every line sounded noble. Every line bought her time with my laptop and another chance to serve dinner. I wrote it down because memory is worse than paper when someone keeps telling you you're overworked. Another ping. She grabbed her phone. Text only, she hissed. I'm finishing the upload. I counted until the sirens bounced inside the house. Dogs barked. She moved fast now, drawers opening, something small getting pocketed. I kept still. I had wanted to believe the caring version of her. Wanting is not evidence. Evidence is what you collect when you are quiet and the other person thinks they are alone. The chair rolled back hard. Feet in the hall. She stopped at the doorway, then hurried to the front window. Blinds clicked. Tires crackled on our street. I stayed on the tile, eyes half-lidded, breathing measured, letting the scene record itself. The blinds snapped shut as her hand jerked them closed, but my eyes stayed half-lidded against the floor glare. The sound of her footsteps faded toward the front door, and the hum of the night gave way to memory. 6 months earlier, I had been standing in an office that smelled like printer toner and burnt coffee. Colonel Reeves tapped a folder with one finger. Collins, you're leading the Hamilton Logistics Automation Program. You'll brief DC in the fall. It's make or break for the contract. He didn't smile often, but that day he did. The folder was thick, full of system diagrams, vendor evaluations, and projected savings. For a captain aiming for major, it was a golden ticket. I shook his hand, thanked him, and told myself I'd live in the office until the work was bulletproof. That night, I called Victoria. She was between jobs again. Congrats, she said flatly. Dad would have been proud. 2 days later, she showed up with a suitcase and a smile that looked glued on. You'll need help. Let me stay a while. I'll cook. You can focus. I didn't argue. Having someone around felt like a relief after 18-hour shifts. She slid into the house like she'd always belonged, filling the fridge, rearranging the pantry, humming while she chopped vegetables. The first week, her timing looked like support. I'd get home from the base and find dinner hot. Sit, eat, you work enough, she'd say. She never asked about security clearances or files, just whether I was sleeping, whether I was pushing too hard. I was. I knew it. The project was huge. Automation for a supply chain that fed entire brigades. If we nailed it, commanders could track rations, ammo, fuel in real time. If we failed, millions wasted, and a black mark on my record. By mid-May, my apartment smelled like roasted salmon and garlic most nights. I'd drop my bag, sit, and eat, while Victoria hovered, proud of her role as caretaker. I told myself I was lucky. Then came the dizziness. The first time I brushed it off. Long day, no lunch. Heat outside. I stood, swayed, caught myself on the counter. You okay? She asked, eyes wide. Yeah, just tired. She guided me to the couch, tucked a blanket, brought water like it was second nature. I laughed it off. Soldiers don't complain about fatigue. We just push. By week 3, it wasn't funny. I'd get home sharp, review slides with a clear head, then eat, and within an hour the fog rolled in. Meetings the next morning felt like slogging through wet sand. Words that had sounded sharp the night before came out tangled. Stress, Victoria said one evening as she wiped the counter. You can't run on fumes forever. Take leave before it breaks you. I can't. Not now. Of course you can. Nobody thanks you when you collapse. Her tone carried more bite than concern, but I ignored it. I needed her cooking, her cleaning, the way she made the place feel less like a barracks. By June, the pattern was obvious. Clear mind at work, fog at home. I chalked it up to long hours and shrugged at colleagues who said I looked pale. Part of the job, I told them. At the house, Victoria tightened her grip on routines. She insisted on making every meal. Your body can't take shortcuts, she'd say, setting down plates. If I offered to cook, she waved me off. No, you'll burn water. Let me. I let her. One Thursday, I had to present a progress brief to the colonel. The morning started sharp. Slides printed, talking points memorized. But halfway through the pitch, my chest went hot, my head swam, and words slid out of order. Reeves raised an eyebrow. I stammered, forced a smile, and got through. Afterward, I sat in my car, palms sweaty on the wheel. I'd rehearsed that deck 20 times. The only variable was me. When I got home, Victoria was at the stove. "You look awful," she said, turning fish in a pan. "Rough day. Exactly why you need to stop. Give the army a break before you break yourself." I warbly. Her eyes lingered, sharp in the steam. I showered and sat down anyway. Fork to plate, bite by bite, the same pattern. Warm food, warm kitchen, and within the hour, a spin in my head. She guided me to the couch again, voice soft. "See? You can't keep this up." I believed her because I wanted to. The summer dragged. I missed details in meetings, forgot small items I'd once tracked without notes. I left my CAC card at home twice. For someone who prided herself on never missing a step, it was humiliating. Victoria filled the gaps with sympathy. "You're pushing too hard. Let me handle things here. Rest more." But her rest didn't restore me. Each dinner pulled me deeper into the fog, and each morning I pulled myself up by sheer habit. In July, during a barbecue at the base, I skipped her cooking, ate ribs, slaw, drank sweet tea. That night I felt fine. Better than fine. The clearest I'd felt in weeks. It nagged at me. I didn't say anything, but I wrote it down. Date, time, what I ate, how I felt. One line in a notebook. The next day, dinner at home, same old menu. Same old dizziness. I wrote that down too. Patterns matter. Soldiers live by them. But this one didn't make sense yet. Victoria noticed me scribbling once. "Work notes?" "Yeah." She nodded and slid a plate toward me. "Eat. You'll think straighter." I smiled, ate, and waited for the spin to come. By August, I had pages filled. Times, meals, symptoms. On the nights I skipped or faked bites, I stayed sharp. On the nights I cleaned my plate, I sank. The data didn't lie, but admitting what it pointed to was harder than staying dizzy. When Dr. Hayes at the clinic asked me about stress, I laughed. "Of course I'm stressed. New project, new role." He raised a brow. "Maybe. But keep track. Details. Every meal. Every symptom. Bring it back." I nodded. Walking out, notebook in hand, I glanced at the grocery list Victoria had left on the fridge. Milk, spinach, salmon, herbs, the same every week. My stomach turned, not from hunger but from a thought I didn't want to finish. The house smelled like garlic when I opened the door that night. She stood at the stove, humming, spoon in hand. "You're late. Sit. Food's hot." I Saturday. The fork felt heavy. The fork hovered halfway to my mouth while she adjusted the salt shaker, watching me too closely. I forced a smile, cut another piece, and tried not to think about the notebook tucked in my bag. By September, her helpfulness had shifted into something sharper. She ran the kitchen like a command post. Every meal was hers, every grocery list hers, every comment about my health sharper than the last. "You're losing weight," she said one evening as she set down a plate of chicken and vegetables. "You're not finishing your food, that's not healthy." "I'm not that hungry tonight." "You're under stress, you need fuel. Sit, eat." It wasn't a suggestion. She stood with her arms folded until I took another bite. At work, I kept slipping, forgetting names mid-sentence, struggling to remember the order of my own slides. People started whispering. "She's not herself," one sergeant muttered when he thought I couldn't hear. Victoria was quick to confirm the doubts. "You're pushing too hard," she told me nightly. "No job is worth this. Take leave before you burn out." It wasn't just about meals anymore. She insisted on managing everything at home. Bills, cleaning, even rearranging my files when I left them on the desk. "You'll thank me," she said when I bristled. "Your system is chaos." It wasn't chaos. I had my methods, color coding, tabs, digital backups, but I'd come home to find folders stacked in ways that made no sense. Passwords accidentally left typed into sticky notes, drawers half open. When I asked, she shrugged. "Just helping." The fog after dinner made it harder to push back. I'd collapse on the couch, groggy and useless, while she hummed in the office. Sometimes I thought I heard the click of my laptop keys, but when I asked, she said she was answering emails on her phone. I wanted to believe her. She was my sister. The breaking point came the night of the interim review. I had rehearsed for days, fighting through the brain fog, clinging to coffee like a lifeline. The slides were solid, but standing in front of the colonel, my vision blurred halfway through. Words jumbled. My throat tightened. "Captain Collins," Reeves interrupted, voice clipped. "Do you need a break?" Humiliation burned hotter than the dizziness. I shook my head, pushed through, and finished with sweat dripping down my back. The colonel dismissed me with a look that said more than words. Unreliable. I drove home, with my hands shaking on the wheel. Victoria was waiting. "Rough day?" she asked, voice too sweet. "Don't start. You see? This project is killing you. You should step back. Let someone else handle it." "No. You're stubborn," she snapped. "Always were. Always had to be the star." I froze. The bite in her tone was new, but the words were old. Childhood old. Dad clapping me on the shoulder after a track meet while Victoria sulked in the background. "Amanda's the strong one," he'd say. "Victoria's just different." She turned back to the stove, slamming a pan harder than necessary. "Sit. Eat. You'll feel better." That night, I couldn't shake the thought that her help felt more like control. The next week, I tried to cook my own meal. Nothing fancy. Eggs, toast. She walked in, saw the pan, and nearly dropped the grocery bag. "What are you doing?" "Cooking." I said I'd handle that. "I'm not a child. I can fry an egg." She snatched the spatula. "Not while you're living like this. You'll make yourself sick." The words hit like a command. I backed off, but the tension between us thickened. At work, I kept notes hidden in my desk drawer, notepad filled with dates, symptoms, meals. I didn't know what the pattern meant yet, but I trusted data more than feelings. At home, Victoria's mask kept slipping. She scolded me for leaving files on the dining table. She asked about project deadlines like she was in the chain of command. One night, I found her in the office when I came back from a late shift. The laptop was closed, but the power light glowed. "Looking for something?" I asked. She didn't flinch. "Your desk was a mess. I organized it." "You don't need to touch my work." "Someone has to. You're drowning." The way she said it made me feel smaller than the dizziness ever had. By October, I started avoiding her food. I'd nibbled just enough to satisfy her and then claim I was full. The result was clear. Fewer dizzy spells, clearer mornings. But she noticed. She always noticed. "You're barely eating," she said one night, eyes narrow. "Are you trying to starve yourself?" "I'm just not hungry." "That's not normal. You should see a doctor." "I already did. And they're running tests." She smirked. "Doctors never find anything." "No." The way she said it chilled me more than the symptoms. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling. The data pointed one way. The memories pointed another. I wanted to be wrong, but every instinct drilled into me by the army told me otherwise. The next morning, I packed my uniform, left for base early, and skipped breakfast. I was sharp, focused, unstoppable. That night, she plated salmon with her usual smile. "Eat up. Big day tomorrow?" I nodded, took a small bite, and waited. 30 minutes later, the fog came back. She sat across the table, watching me fade, her fork idle. "You see," she said softly, "you can't keep this up." The words echoed long after I staggered to the couch. My notebook filled with more entries, tighter handwriting, sharper details. The pattern wasn't just coincidence anymore, it was deliberate. And once I let myself consider that, the house stopped feeling like home. The morning after another dizzy night, I dragged myself into the clinic at Fort Hamilton. The fluorescent lights stung, and I felt like I'd pulled a double shift without sleep. Dr. Benjamin Hayes, an army physician I'd known in passing, looked at me the way mechanics look at an engine they know won't pass inspection. "You don't look good, Captain," he said. "How long has this been happening?" "Couple of months," I admitted, dropping into the chair across from him. "Mostly in the evenings. I'll be fine all day. Then after dinner, I start spinning. Memory fog, headaches, sometimes even slurred speech." He leaned forward, pen tapping on his clipboard. "And it's consistent? Always after dinner?" I hesitated. Saying it out loud made it sound too neat, too obvious. "Yeah, pretty much." He asked about stress, sleep, caffeine, medications. I gave honest answers. Stress? Yes. Sleep, not enough. Coffee, always. Meds, none. He frowned at each answer, but none of it explained the symptoms. We'll run blood tests, he said finally. Thyroid, vitamin deficiencies, standard panels. Could be anything from iron levels to dehydration. I nodded, but his expression told me he didn't buy that explanation. He scribbled a note and looked up again. Here's what I want you to do. Keep a log. Write down exactly what you eat, when you eat it, and when the symptoms start. Include how long they last. You're trained to track details, treat it like a mission. I almost laughed at that, but he wasn't wrong. Soldiers live on logs, charts, and after-action reports. Writing down food and dizziness felt almost too simple, but I agreed. Walking out of the clinic, I felt lighter just having someone treat me like I wasn't losing my mind. For weeks, I'd let myself believe stress was the culprit. Now, I had a task. When I got home, Victoria was in the kitchen, chopping onions with military precision. "Where were you?" she asked without looking up. "Clinic," I said, dropping my bag. Her knife slowed just slightly. "Something wrong?" "Routine check," I lied. "They're running tests." She nodded, lips pressed thin, and went back to chopping. "Doctors never find anything. You probably just need more rest." I didn't respond. Instead, I pulled out a small notebook and started writing. Date, time, what I ate, how I felt. She noticed, but said nothing. That night, dinner was salmon again. I ate a normal portion and waited. 30 minutes later, dizziness hit like clockwork. My handwriting on the page wavered, but I wrote it down anyway. The next night, I excused myself halfway through the meal, dumped half the food into a paper towel, flushed it, and returned to the table. I logged the time. An hour later, I felt fine, sharp, alert, clear. The pattern was undeniable. The log filled with entries, all pointing the same direction. Eat her cooking, symptoms. Skip it, no symptoms. One Saturday, I ate lunch at the base cafeteria, worked late, and didn't get home until after 9. Victoria was annoyed. "I made dinner," she said, holding up a plate. "I already ate," I replied. Her eyes narrowed just slightly before she forced a smile. "Well, I'll save it for tomorrow." The notebook stayed hidden in my work bag, away from her reorganizing hands. I reviewed it nightly, lining up times like evidence in a case file. My instincts screamed, but instincts weren't proof. Proof needed details. Dr. Hayes called a week later with test results. "All clean," he said. "No deficiencies, no obvious issues. How's the log?" I flipped through the pages. Consistent. Symptoms tie to meals. The nights I skip, I'm fine. He paused. "And who's preparing the meals?" I froze. "My sister. She moved in a while back." Another pause. "Captain, I can't draw conclusions for you, but the data is pointing somewhere. Be careful. Keep documenting. Don't confront until you're sure." "No." "Be careful." Easy advice, harder in practice. At home, Victoria's questions grew sharper. "Why aren't you finishing your food? You used to eat more. Are you dieting? That's not healthy." "I'm not hungry." She frowned. "You're acting different." Her eyes lingered on me longer than usual, like she was measuring my answers. I tightened security on my laptop, changed passwords, and double-checked file logs. Twice, I found timestamps showing access when I wasn't in the room. I started locking the office door, but keys have a way of multiplying in families. The control kept tightening. She commented on what time I got home, how long I worked, even who I talked to on the phone. "You don't sound well," she'd say, half accusation, half warning. The notebook filled with more entries, and each line made the truth harder to ignore. At work, my performance dipped enough that Reeves pulled me aside. "You need to sort yourself out, Captain. This project can't fail." End of 4. "Yes, sir," I said, forcing confidence I didn't feel. Walking out, I knew failure wasn't an option, not with my rank, not with my record, and not with the project hanging on me. If I crashed, someone else would step in. All the work I'd poured into it would be gone. At home, dinner waited, same as always. She slid a plate toward me, smiling like a doting sister. "Eat up, you'll think clearer." I picked up the fork, felt her eyes on me, and knew the log in my bag told the real story. I chewed. swallowed just enough to keep her satisfied, and jotted down the time under the table. 30 minutes later, the fog crept in, exactly on schedule. Patterns don't lie. People do. The fork scraped against the plate while I rehearsed the plan in my head. If the log was right, I'd prove it tonight. Nothing fancy, no elaborate sting, just a soldier running a controlled test. Dinner was Victoria's usual routine seafood pasta, her specialty. She hummed while stirring the sauce, talking about nothing, filling the air with harmless chatter. I sat at the table pretending to scroll my phone, but my chest buzzed with nerves. "Hungry?" she asked, sliding the steaming bowl in front of me. "Starving," I said, forcing a grin. I twirled noodles, chewed slowly, and swallowed every bite. No paper towel tricks, no flushing food. I logged the time in my notebook. 7:14 p.m. The first 20 minutes were uneventful. We cleared plates, she rinsed dishes, and I answered work emails. At 7:51, it hit. The spin started in my vision, the fog creeping behind my eyes. My hand cramped around the pen as I jotted it down. Dizziness, 37 minutes. Victoria hovered, concerned as always. "You don't look good. Want to lie down?" "Yeah," I muttered, my words already thick. She guided me to the couch, tucked the blanket, and brushed my hair back like a caring sister. If I hadn't seen the log, I would have believed every move. Through the haze, I reached into my pocket and clicked the recorder on. My voice slurred, but I described everything. The tight chest, the heavy eyelids, the way my brain lagged like a bad radio signal. Proof, not just feelings. Her footsteps faded down the hall. A door creaked. My office chair squeaked. The hum of my laptop fan carried faintly. Even half gone, I knew those sounds. She wasn't scrolling her phone or folding laundry. She was inside my system. I fought to stay awake, fingers twitching, mind screaming to move. The fog smothered me, but the recorder kept rolling, capturing my struggle. Later, when I woke, the blanket was pulled up, the lights dimmed, and my laptop sat on the desk like it had never been touched. My head throbbed, but I grabbed the recorder and played it back. My voice was barely audible, but it was there, timestamps, symptoms, and the quiet background hum of my computer coming to life. The next morning I flipped through the log. Every entry lined up. Eat her food, lose control. Skip it, stay sharp. Last night had been the clearest test yet. At work, I buried myself in the project, but my focus sharpened into anger. It wasn't just about health anymore, it was about betrayal. Someone in my own house was sabotaging me, and the evidence pointed in one direction. That night, I ran another test. This time, I excused myself mid-meal, dumped half the portion, and came back with an empty plate. 30 minutes passed, and nothing happened. My mind was clear, my memory sharp, my hands steady. I logged it in tight handwriting. 7:15 dinner skipped, 8 no symptoms. The data wasn't a theory anymore. It was a pattern, documented, undeniable. Victoria noticed the difference. "You seem energetic," she said, eyeing me over the rim of her glass. "Guess I got some good rest," I answered, keeping my face neutral. She smirked. Or maybe the army finally slowed down. The sarcasm in her tone wasn't lost on me. I started alternating meals, eat one night, skip the next. The notebook showed the truth in black and white. Symptoms matched her cooking, never mine. She didn't miss the change. "You're barely eating lately," she pressed one Friday night. "That's not like you." "Lost my appetite," I said casually. "That's dangerous," she insisted, pushing the plate closer. "You can't starve yourself." "I'll be fine." Her jaw tightened. She stabbed at her food, chewing harder than necessary. The next morning, I sat in my car outside the base, flipping through the log again. Each line was a nail in the coffin of denial. The army trained me to trust data over feelings, and the data screamed louder than anything. At lunch, I told Dr. Hayes the results. "Every time I eat her food, I crash," I said flatly. His brow furrowed. "That's serious. You need to be careful. Do not confront her yet. Just keep collecting. Make sure you're safe." Safe. The word rattled in my head as I drove home. Soldiers aren't used to feeling unsafe in their own kitchen. That evening, Victoria was already plating chicken when I walked in. "You're late," she said. "Traffic," I replied. I watched her sprinkle herbs, stir sauce, plate with care. She wasn't careless, not once. Every move was calculated, precise, practiced. I sat down, fork in hand, notebook hidden under a file in my bag. This time, I ate just enough to trigger it, then stopped. 30 minutes later, I felt the familiar spin creeping in. She smiled faintly. See? You're sick. I told you. I wrote the time, pressed the pen into the page harder than I meant to. Sick wasn't the word. Poisoned was. The log, the recorder, the sounds of my laptop waking when I was half conscious together, they painted a picture I didn't want to see but couldn't ignore. Her care wasn't care. Her control wasn't protection. It was a setup. And now that I had proof in writing, I wasn't the one under her control anymore. The logbook sat thick with entries, but words on paper weren't enough. In the army, suspicion doesn't count, you need proof. I'd been trained to track digital footprints, lock down systems, and catch intruders without tipping them off. If my sister was crossing the line, I was going to catch her the same way I would a foreign hacker. First move was my laptop. I set up a system log that recorded every login attempt and every file touched, complete with timestamps. A simple script, nothing fancy, but enough to tell me if someone else was inside my files when I wasn't. The second step was audio. I ordered 2 tiny voice recorders, the kind reporters use, and hid one under the office desk and one in the kitchen. They blended in with power cords and furniture dust. If she moved around at night, I'd hear it. The third step was a camera. I couldn't exactly put military-grade surveillance in my own apartment without raising questions, so I went small, one of those home security gadgets you can buy online. I disguised it as a phone charger. It pointed at the desk where my laptop Saturday. That night, Victoria made stir-fry, cheerful as ever. Long day? She asked. Yeah, I said flatly. You should relax more. You've been tense. I forced a smile, knowing the devices were running quietly. I nibbled just enough to trigger the fog and let myself fade onto the couch. She helped, of course, covering me with a blanket, acting the part. The recordings picked up what my eyes couldn't. At 11:23 p.m., her footsteps entered the office. A chair scraped. My laptop chimed awake. The disguised camera caught her pulling a small USB drive from her pocket and plugging it in. She typed with ease, like someone who'd been through the folders before. I watched the footage the next morning with my stomach tight. She didn't even hesitate, straight into my project files, clicking through the diagrams, the progress reports, the drafts marked Final V3. She leaned closer to the screen, scribbling something into her own notebook. Then she yanked the USB, tucked it away, and shut the laptop down like nothing happened. The audio caught her whispering, "Almost there." Almost there to what? Selling my work? Wrecking my career? The next day, I checked the system log. Sure enough, login at 11:23 p.m., files accessed, USB mounted, files copied. Everything matched. That was no accident. That was espionage. I tightened the net. Every night, I let the devices roll while I feigned sleep. Every morning, I checked logs, recordings, and the camera. Each time, she went back for more. It wasn't just files anymore. She was combing through emails, budget breakdowns, even draft memos I hadn't shared with anyone. One evening, I deliberately left a decoy folder labeled Morrison Backup on the desktop. Inside, I placed scrambled notes, half-true numbers, and fake projections. That night, the camera caught her grinning when she found it. She copied the entire folder, completely unaware it was junk. Seeing her fall for the bait almost made me laugh. But the humor didn't last. The truth was uglier. My own sister was trying to hand over military project files to someone else. Her daytime behavior grew bolder too. She asked questions about deadlines, about who was attending meetings, about when I was scheduled to present. She masked it as casual curiosity, but the way she leaned in, waiting for answers, felt like interrogation. I stopped giving details. Just regular updates, I'd say, keeping it vague. She didn't like that. One evening she snapped, "You never tell me anything. I'm the one keeping this place together while you kill yourself, and you act like I don't deserve to know what's going on." I set my fork down. Deserve to know? It's classified work. Nobody deserves to know except people with clearance. Her eyes narrowed, but she smiled quickly after. "I'm just worried. Don't get so defensive." In die. Defensive wasn't the word. I was cautious, calculating, and inching toward proof strong enough to nail her. By week 3 of monitoring, the recordings piled up. The logs were airtight. The video clips showed her sneaking into the office night after night, USB in hand, sometimes whispering to herself about deadlines and payments. Payments. That word hung heavy. Who was paying her? I checked her phone when she left it charging on the counter. Nothing obvious, just texts about groceries, job boards, meaningless chatter. But she was careful. Too careful. She must have been using another phone or deleting messages as soon as they came through. So I set another trap. I left my laptop on with a fake document titled Final Logistics Contract. Inside, a hidden tracker logged every time it was opened and copied. That night, just past midnight, the camera caught her plugging in the USB and pulling the file. The tracker pinged my account instantly. Now I had it all. Timestamps, video, system logs, even a direct capture of the theft. The next morning, she acted normal, making pancakes like a doting sister. "Eat up," she said, sliding the plate in front of me. I pushed it aside. "Not hungry," she frowned. "You can't keep skipping meals. I'll manage." She narrowed her eyes, but didn't push. My phone buzzed with a message from Dr. Hayes. "Any progress with the log?" I typed back. "More than a log. I have proof." He replied, "Be careful. Don't confront her alone." The words echoed in my head as I sipped black coffee and watched her move around the kitchen. She thought she was winning. She thought I was slipping. She thought she controlled the game. But I had the training, the tools, and now the evidence. She didn't know it yet, but every keystroke she made on my laptop was one step closer to her undoing. The smell of her pancakes clung to the kitchen, but my head wasn't in the present. Watching her hum and flip breakfast like nothing was wrong, my mind drifted back to when we were kids. It's funny how betrayal feels sharper when you can remember the same person holding your hand across a busy street. Our dad was Army through and through. Morning runs, pressed uniforms, inspections that felt like drill even at home. He believed discipline built character, and he handed it out like rations. For him, my achievements were proof his methods worked. For Victoria, his silence was proof she wasn't enough. I remembered the track meets in high school. I'd cross the finish line first, and he'd clap me on the back with pride. "That's my soldier," he'd say, loud enough for Victoria to hear. She tried tennis, choir, painting, none of it stuck. She drifted while I thrived. Even as a kid, I could see the jealousy simmering. It didn't vanish when we grew up. I enlisted, commissioned, and climbed the ranks. She bounced from one job to another, never quite landing, always looking like the world owed her something. Whenever she visited, she'd smile and say she was proud, but there was a weight in her eyes that contradicted the words. One night, years before she moved in, she'd been drinking wine at my place. She leaned back in her chair and said, "You know, you were always the golden child. I was the screw-up. Dad never looked at me the way he looked at you." I told her it wasn't true, that she was just different, not less. She laughed bitterly. "Easy for you to say when you're the one in uniform." Now, standing in my kitchen, watching her pretend to be the helpful sister, I understood that conversation better than I had back then. Her help wasn't about family. It was about control, about clawing back what she thought life had denied her. That week, the tension thickened. She hovered over me like a warden, asking if I'd logged enough hours of sleep, if I was eating properly, if I'd made progress at work. But the tone wasn't concern. It was monitoring. "You're distracted," she said one evening, slamming a cabinet harder than necessary. "You think I don't notice? You're slipping." I didn't answer. My notepad was hidden in my office, full of entries she hadn't seen. She didn't need to know how much I'd figured out. Her mask cracked again when she thought I wasn't listening. I walked past the kitchen and heard her mutter under her breath. "Not much longer. She'll fold." I froze just out of sight, chest tight. Fold. Like I was a hand of cards she was about to play. Later that night, I went through the surveillance footage again. Her pattern was clear: wait until I was asleep, then dig through my files. But something in her expression caught me. She wasn't nervous or cautious, she was smug. Like this was her destiny. The Army taught me that enemies aren't always loud. Sometimes, the ones smiling across the table are the most dangerous. I started replaying childhood moments with a new filter. The time she borrowed my essay in middle school and turned it in as her own. The time she sabotaged my science project because she didn't want me to win again. Back then, it felt like sibling rivalry. Now, it felt like a pattern. The words she'd thrown at me as an adult kept replaying, always had to be the star. I began writing down not just meals and symptoms, but memories, pieces of a puzzle I hadn't connected before. The jealousy wasn't new, the sabotage wasn't sudden. It had been brewing for decades. One Thursday, she cornered me at dinner. "You look terrible," she said, staring hard at me. "I'm fine. You're not. You can barely hold it together. Maybe you should step back from this project before you embarrass yourself." Her tone was sharp, almost gleeful. That's when it hit me. She didn't just want me to rest. She wanted me to fail. I set my fork down and looked her dead in the eye. "Why do you care so much?" She froze, then smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Because you're my sister. I don't want to see you ruin yourself." It sounded rehearsed, like a line she'd practiced. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual. She was already in the kitchen, sipping coffee, staring out the window. She didn't turn when I walked in. "You should take the day off," she said flatly. "No," I answered, pouring my own cup. She finally turned. "You think you're invincible. You're not." The words carried more bite than any sibling advice ever should. Later that night, when I came home from base, she stood at the counter, arms crossed. "You think you're smarter than everyone else. You think you can juggle everything forever. But you can't." I stared at her, not answering. She leaned closer. "One way or another, you're going to crash. And when you do, don't say I didn't warn you." The venom in her voice cut deeper than any of the dizziness. I walked away, heart pounding, and sat in my office. My laptop logs, my surveillance clips, my notebook, they were no longer just about symptoms. They were about intent. She wasn't helping me. She was orchestrating my collapse. And now, I knew she wasn't afraid to say it out loud. The next night, I slid a small plastic bag into my pocket before heading to the kitchen. It wasn't standard issue, just a sandwich bag from the drawer, but it would do the job. The recorder was already running in my waistband, silent and hidden. I sat at the table, steadying my breathing, and reminded myself that in the field, nerves get soldiers killed. At home, nerves get sisters exposed. Victoria plated salmon again. All smiles. "I tried a new seasoning. Tell me what you think." "Looks good," I said, twirling my fork. Every time she turned her head, I shifted bites into the bag in my lap. I kept my face neutral, chewing a little, swallowing just enough to sell the act. 20 minutes later, the bag was heavy, and my stomach was empty. She watched me too closely. "Slow eater tonight." "Savoring it," I answered, keeping my tone casual. She nodded and poured herself a glass of wine. "Big presentation coming up?" "Yeah," I said, forcing my voice steady. "It's important." That was all I gave her. Nothing useful, nothing real. By 8:20, I pushed my chair back. "I feel dizzy," I muttered, gripping the counter for effect. Her eyes lit up just slightly before she masked it with concern. "Oh no? Again? Sit down. I'll get you water." Instead, I let my knees buckle. The ceramic plate I'd placed on the edge of the counter crashed onto the tile with a sharp crack. I collapsed beside it, limbs loose, eyes half closed, chest rising shallow. "Mandy? Mandy?" She was at my side in seconds, shaking my shoulder. She pressed her fingers to my wrist, checking my pulse like she'd done it 100 times. "Come on, wake up." I didn't move. Her hand lifted. Footsteps retreated. A drawer slid open. A phone clicked. "It's me," she said, her voice stripped of every ounce of sisterly warmth. "She's out. Took longer tonight, but she went down. House day." My chest tightened, but I kept my breathing steady. "Yes, I'll have the files tonight. Everything is on her laptop. She keeps the finals off the network, exactly where you wanted them." She paused. "The transfer clears tonight, right? I've done this for months. I'm not risking more without payment." My stomach nodded. Months. She'd admitted it out loud. From the floor, I heard the faint creak of my office chair as she walked down the hall. My laptop chimed awake. Keys clicked. A USB tone sounded. I forced my body to stay limp, though every muscle screamed to jump up and rip the drive out of her hand. Patience. Proof mattered more than instinct. The recorder caught her voice again. Budget breakdown, logistics draft, final deck. Yeah, I see it. She never changes her file paths. It's all here. The casual way she said it cut deeper than the dizziness ever had. A message pinged on her phone. She muttered, "Payment confirmed." "I do." Footsteps padded back toward the kitchen. She crouched beside me again, brushed my forehead with fake tenderness, and whispered, "Sleep well, baby sister. Tomorrow changes everything." The words chilled me, but I didn't flinch. She stood, poured herself another glass of wine, and went back to the office. The chair rolled, the typing resumed, and the transfer bar I couldn't see ticked closer to finishing. I lay there, every sense sharpened, memorizing each sound, the whir of the laptop fan, the faint scratch of her pen as she jotted notes, the buzz of her phone with every new message. Evidence was stacking itself. I shifted one finger against the tile, slow enough not to draw attention. My phone vibrated softly against my hip. I unlocked it with muscle memory and typed a single message to my contact at CID. Emergency. Sister stealing project files. Proof in progress. Send help to address. I slid the phone back under me and stilled again. Minutes stretched. She hummed lightly from the office, too pleased with herself, too certain I was unconscious. The army teaches you discipline, control over your body when your instincts want to fight or flee. That training kept me steady while my own sister betrayed me just a few feet away. I listened as she muttered, "Perfect. Marcus will be thrilled." Marcus. A name. A target. I repeated it in my head, memorizing it like an enemy call sign. The clock ticked louder in the silence. She typed faster, humming, sipping wine. I lay still, body aching against the hard tile, but unmoving. She thought I was gone, and that mistake was giving me everything I needed. My phone stayed tucked against my hip, screen dim, but the emergency message had gone out. The vibration confirmed it. Now I had to keep breathing shallow, keep my body slack, and make sure Victoria never suspected I was anything but unconscious. From the office came the sound of my laptop's fan humming harder as she dumped files onto her drive. Keys clacked with purpose. I could hear the faint clink of her wine glass as she set it down between keystrokes. Every detail was evidence, but evidence only mattered if I survived long enough for backup to arrive. Minutes passed like hours. My back ached from the tile, but I didn't dare shift. A shadow stretched across the kitchen floor, the outline of her returning. She crouched beside me again, 2 fingers pressing against my neck like she was confirming I was still out cold. "Still breathing," she whispered. "Good girl." Her tone wasn't sisterly. It was clinical, detached, the way someone might check on a lab rat. She stood, footsteps light, and poured another drink. The smell of wine drifted through the room. I let my lungs rise slow, calculated. Inside, my pulse hammered, but outside, I was stone. At 9:07, my phone buzzed again, barely audible under me. CID's automated reply. Message received. Units en route. Do not engage suspect. Relief threatened to break my cover, but I stayed down. Victoria's voice carried from the office. "Yes, Marcus, she's completely out. I'll have everything in another 20 minutes. She laughed lightly, a sound that had no trace of warmth. "She thinks she's sick. It's pathetic." Hearing my own sister call me pathetic cut deeper than any betrayal I'd faced in combat zones. But I held the line. She returned again, muttering as she washed out a glass in the sink. "After this, I'll finally get what I deserve." Deserve. The word sliced like a blade. She believed she was owed my career, my work, my future. Another buzz from my phone, a text this time. Discreet vibration against the tile. CID agent Carla Monroe. "Sit tight. We're moving in. ETA 10. 10 minutes. I just needed to keep still, keep breathing shallow, and not give myself away." Victoria paced between the kitchen and the office, restless now. "Almost done," she muttered to herself. "He's going to pay double for this. Has to." She refilled her glass again, the sound of liquid hitting crystal echoing too loud in the tension. She was drunk on more than wine, she was drunk on control. I shifted one hand slightly, enough to angle the recorder in my waistband toward her voice. Her words spilled into the device, unfiltered, damning. At 9:14, the first distant wail of a siren floated in. My heart jumped. but I didn't move. Victoria stiffened, pausing mid-step. No, 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 she muttered. She hurried to the window, peeking through the blinds. Shit! Her footsteps pounded back to the office. Drawers slammed, papers rustled. The frantic clicking of keys filled the apartment as she tried to finish or maybe cover her tracks. I knew those sirens weren't random. They were my cavalry, my reinforcement, my safety net. She stormed back into the kitchen, breathing hard, scanning the floor where I lay. Mandy? She hissed. She knelt, shook my shoulder roughly. Wake up. I stayed limp, forcing my body not to react. She cursed under her breath. Fine. Stay out. She sprinted back down the hall, the chair screeching as she shoved it against the desk. The sirens grew louder, joined by the crunch of tires on gravel outside. Doors slammed. Boots hit pavement. Voice barked short commands. I heard Victoria's panic in the office, USB yanked out. A drawer forced shut, footsteps scrambling. The front door burst open. Sid! Military police! Hands where we can see them! Victoria screamed, What the hell is this? Step away from the computer now. Chaos erupted, boots pounding. Drawers yanked open. Her protest sharp and frantic. I pushed myself up slowly from the kitchen floor, every joint stiff, every muscle aching from the act. CID agents in tactical gear swarmed the hallway. One spotted me and motioned. Ma'am, step this way. I nodded, voice low. She's in the office. She has a USB and there's a vial on the desk. Agent Monroe locked eyes with me, her tone clipped and steady. We've got it. Stay clear. I leaned against the counter, finally letting myself breathe like a human again as they stormed my office. Victoria shrieked, cursing, yelling my name like I was the traitor. You set me up, Mandy. You think you're better than me? You always thought you were better. Her words bounced through the apartment as they cuffed her, read her rights, and pulled her out. She thrashed, spit venom, her face twisted with fury. I stayed where I was, my legs trembling, my hands gripping the counter to stay upright. The evidence was secured, my body was alive, and the betrayal was no longer hidden in the dark. The army teaches you patience, but in that moment, patience had bought me survival, and the truth laid bare. The sound of boots moving across my hallway snapped me into reality. The apartment that had been quiet for months was suddenly alive with sharp voices, the thud of drawers being pulled open, and the clatter of gear. Agent Monroe's voice cut through the chaos, firm and commanding. Secure the device, bag the vial, copy everything before it disappears. Victoria was pinned in my office, arms twisted behind her back. She spat words at the agents like a cornered animal. You can't do this. You don't understand. That's my work. She stole it from me. I stood in the doorway, chest still tight from hours of holding my breath. One of the MPs turned, nodding toward me. Ma'am, please step back. We'll take it from here. I didn't move right away. My eyes were locked on my sister, the same girl I'd once shared bunk beds with, now thrashing in handcuffs while CID officers pulled a thumb drive from her clenched fist. She looked wild, hair tangled, eyes bloodshot with panic. You ruined everything, she screamed at me. Everything I ever had, you took it. Agent Monroe shoved her forward toward the hallway. Save it for the courtroom. I-7. The office was a mess, papers scattered, drawers open, my laptop screen glowing with the evidence she hadn't had time to erase. One officer carefully picked up the small glass vial I'd seen earlier, slipping it into an evidence bag. Another held up a notebook filled with scribbles, page after page of dates, file names, and dollar amounts. Chain of custody secure, one MP called out. USB drive recovered, logging serial now, another replied. It felt surreal, watching my own home treated like a crime scene, but the efficiency of the raid kept me grounded. They weren't just arresting her, they were dismantling her entire scheme piece by piece. Victoria tried again, her voice cracking. Mandy, tell them I was helping you. You know I was just trying to protect you. I finally spoke, my voice sharper than I expected. Protect me? You poisoned me for months. I? The room went still for half a beat, the agents watching her reaction. Her jaw clenched, and then she laughed a short, bitter sound. You deserved it. You always thought you were better than me. Dad thought you were better. Everyone did. At least this way, I was finally in control. Agent Monroe yanked her toward the door, not giving her another chance to rant. Move. As they dragged her out, I followed them into the living room. Red and blue lights pulsed against the windows, painting the walls in sharp flashes. Neighbors were starting to gather outside, whispering, phones in hand. The whole block would know by morning. On the lawn, Victoria twisted in her cuffs, trying to face me one last time. "You think you won? You think this makes you strong? You'll never be anything without me." The words didn't land the way she wanted. They sounded hollow, desperate. The same sister who used to beg me to help with her homework was now screaming like a criminal in denial. The agents loaded her into the back of a waiting vehicle. She kicked once against the doorframe before they forced her in. The sound of the door slamming shut was louder than the sirens. Inside, the team continued processing. An MP placed my laptop into a protective bag. Another officer explained, "We'll clone the drive and return the machine. The thumb drive will be analyzed separately. Everything looks consistent with espionage protocols." I nodded, my voice quiet. "Just make sure it's airtight. She's been at this for months." "It is," Agent Monroe assured me, pulling off her gloves. "Between your recordings, the system logs, and what we just caught her doing in real time, there's no walking away from this." I leaned against the counter, exhaustion finally pressing down on me. The tile floor where I had faked unconsciousness was littered with shards of the plate I'd shattered. It felt symbolic. Something once whole, now broken beyond repair. One MP swept up the ceramic pieces and sealed them in a bag. "Possible evidence of staging," he noted. I almost laughed. Trust me, it was intentional. She thought I was down. Agent Monroe gave me a measured look. "Smart play. Dangerous, but smart." I shrugged. "I learned from the best." "No." The apartment slowly emptied of uniforms as evidence was catalogued and loaded into vans. The red-blue glow outside dimmed as vehicles pulled away. Silence crept back in, heavier than before. Victoria was gone, but the echo of her voice lingered. The accusations, the venom, the laugh. Agent Monroe stayed behind for a final briefing. She stood with her notebook, steady and calm. "She'll be processed tonight. Charges will include attempted corporate espionage, tampering with military projects, and domestic poisoning. You'll need to provide a formal statement first thing in the morning." I nodded, rubbing my temples. "I'll be there." "Get some rest," she said. "You did exactly what you had to do." When she left, the apartment finally fell silent again. I walked into my office, staring at the chair where Victoria had sat, copying everything she could. The faint smell of her perfume still clung to the air. I picked up her notebook, flipping through pages of my stolen work written in her sloppy handwriting. Diagrams copied line by line, notes on my meetings, even reminders about when I'd felt sick, like she was keeping score of her own sabotage. The weight of betrayal pressed harder than the evidence in my hands. My own sister had treated me like an obstacle to demolish. I dropped the notebook onto the desk and sat in the chair. For the first time in months, my laptop was mine again. No hidden hands, no midnight copying, no false concern hovering nearby. The clock read 1:47 a.m. I hadn't slept. My body was buzzing with adrenaline, my mind racing through every detail of what had just happened. Out the window, the street was quiet now. The last MP vehicle pulled away, leaving nothing but the faint smell of exhaust in the cool air. I sat back, staring at the blank desktop screen, the hum of the fan steady. The apartment was still. The chaos had passed. But the war inside my family had only just been dragged into the light. By morning, the adrenaline had drained out of my body, leaving me heavy and sore. I put on a clean uniform and drove to the CID office for my formal statement. The building felt sterile fluorescent lights, plain gray walls, a waiting area that smelled faintly of stale coffee. Agent Monroe met me at the door, businesslike, but not unkind. "Captain Collins," she said, nodding once. "We'll keep this straightforward. You'll go over what happened, we'll match it to the evidence, and you'll be free to leave." I sat in a small interview room with a recorder on the table. Monroe asked clear, precise questions, the kind I was used to answering in the field. Dates, times, symptoms, what I ate, what I logged. I described how I'd set up surveillance, how I'd planted decoys, how I'd staged my collapse. Every answer matched the digital trail, the video, and the audio. When we finished, Monroe clicked the recorder off. Your sister's arraignment is scheduled for Monday. You'll be notified if your presence is required. The U.S. Attorney's Office will handle the prosecution. With what we have, it's a strong case. Strong enough to stick? I asked. She met my eyes. Absolutely. She's looking at multiple felonies: corporate espionage, attempted theft of military data, and poisoning. Even without the military angle, the poisoning alone would put her away. Together, she won't walk free for years. The words didn't give me satisfaction. They landed like lead. The courtroom was packed on arraignment day. Reporters sat shoulder to shoulder, pens flying, cameras flashing whenever the judge entered. Victoria shuffled in wearing a county jumpsuit, hair pulled back, wrists cuffed. She looked smaller, but her eyes still burned with defiance. When the charges were read, she smirked at me across the room. "Not guilty," she said firmly. I sat rigid, fists clenched in my lap. Not guilty, as if the hours of video, the stolen files, the vial of sedatives were nothing but illusions. The trial itself dragged for weeks. Prosecutors laid out everything: my logs, the surveillance footage, the recordings of her phone calls. They brought in Dr. Hayes, who testified that my symptoms matched long-term sedative exposure. The CID techs walked the jury through each file she'd copied, showing timestamps that matched the hidden cameras. Victoria's defense tried to spin it. They claimed I was paranoid, overworked, inventing symptoms. They argued that the food could have made me dizzy for innocent reasons. But when the prosecutor played the recording of her voice saying, "She's out, took longer tonight, but she went down," the jury members shifted in their seats. No explanation could spin those words. I testified too. Sitting in the witness box, I described months of confusion, the feeling of betrayal, the moment I heard her on the phone planning to hand over my work. I kept my tone steady, military steady, even when my throat wanted to close. Victoria glared at me the whole time, whispering to her lawyer, shaking her head like I was the liar. The verdict came back in 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. When the judge announced the sentence, 15 years in federal prison with no chance of parole, for at least 10, Victoria didn't cry. She didn't plead. She leaned forward and hissed across the courtroom, "You think you're free of me. You're not. You'll never be." Security hauled her away before she could say more. The sound of her voice still rang in my ears. Reporters swarmed the courthouse steps. "Captain Collins, do you feel vindicated? How does it feel to testify against your own sister? Do you think this will impact your military career?" I gave no comment, walked straight to my car, and drove off. The cameras followed, but I didn't stop. At home, the silence was worse than the noise. Every room carried her shadow: the kitchen where she cooked with fake care, the office chair she stole my files from, the couch where I lay dizzy while she watched. The apartment wasn't home anymore. It was evidence. Family weighed heavier than any mission. I got calls from relatives who couldn't process what had happened. Some blamed me, said I should have protected her, helped her, kept it in the family. Others avoided me entirely, ashamed that the Collins name was now tied to federal charges. One call stood out: my aunt in Ohio. Her voice was quiet, sad. "Honey, you did what you had to do. Don't let anyone tell you different. She made her choices. You made yours." It helped, but it didn't heal. Work became my refuge. My commanding officer called me in, reviewed the situation, and assured me that I'd done everything by the book. "You stopped a major breach," he said. "Don't carry guilt that isn't yours." Still, the guilt clung. I threw myself into the Morrison project, the one Victoria had tried to gut. Long nights, tighter security, stricter protocols. I presented the final deck at the Pentagon, and the contract was approved. Titan Strategies, the company pulling Victoria's strings, faced their own investigation. Marcus Grant, the executive she'd whispered about, was indicted for attempted procurement of stolen defense data. Watching him get perp-walked on the news gave me a colder satisfaction. That wasn't family, that was an enemy, plain and simple. But with Victoria, nothing felt simple. When I thought of her, it wasn't just the courtroom or the poison. It was birthdays we shared, the times she'd patched my scraped knees, the nights we stayed up, whispering secrets as kids. All of that had been twisted into fuel for her betrayal. I visited her once, months after the sentencing. She sat behind a plexiglass divider, orange jumpsuit stark against the drab gray of the prison room. She picked up the phone, smirk tugging at her lips. Come to gloat? No, I said. Came to understand. There's nothing to understand, she snapped. You had everything. I had nothing. I took what was mine. It was never yours. Her eyes darkened. You'll regret this. Maybe not today. But you will. I hung up the phone before she could say more. Her face blurred as I walked out, the divider reflecting back only my own. That night, I stood on my balcony in uniform, looking out at the city lights. Betrayal had cut my family in half, left scars no courtroom could erase. But I was still standing, still serving, still moving forward. The army had taught me discipline, but life had taught me something harsher, that sometimes the enemy isn't across the ocean. Sometimes she grows up in the same house, eats at the same table, and calls you sister. The day the Morrison contract was finalized, I stood in a Pentagon briefing room wearing my Class A uniform. Rows of officials, contractors, and fellow officers filled the seats. My presentation was polished, secure, and unshakable. Every slide I showed, every answer I gave, carried the weight of survival not just of the project but of myself. When the board chair announced, "Contract awarded," the applause was sharp, clean, and final. Later, in the hallway, Colonel Reeves stopped me. He had a reputation for never wasting words. "Collins, good work. You turned a crisis into a victory. Not many officers could have handled what you did." "Thank you, sir," I said, standing at attention. "You'll be hearing about a promotion soon. Major suits you." His words stuck with me the entire drive home. Major Collins. It wasn't just a title, it was proof that no amount of sabotage, poison, or betrayal could erase what I had earned. At home, the apartment felt different. Victoria's presence was gone, scrubbed clean by CID teams and time. The silence no longer felt suffocating. It felt earned. I placed a framed copy of the signed Morrison contract on my desk, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. A few weeks later, I received official notice. My promotion to major was approved. The ceremony was small, held on base with colleagues, and a handful of family who still stood by me. My aunt pinned the new insignia on my uniform, her hands shaking slightly. "Your father would be proud," she whispered. I smiled, but I knew pride was complicated in my family. Dr. Hayes came too. After the ceremony, he shook my hand. "You didn't just survive this, you documented it like an investigator. Without your discipline, it could have ended much worse." "Discipline's the one thing I never lost," I said. Not everyone in my family celebrated. A cousin sent a letter saying I'd destroyed Victoria's life. I didn't reply. Victoria destroyed her own life. I just refused to let her take mine down with it. Work didn't slow down. The Morrison project launched, and within 6 months it exceeded every projection. Sales spiked, recognition soared, and my team was hailed as a model for defense industry partnerships. Colleagues started asking me to speak at conferences, not just about marketing strategy, but about resilience, security, and leadership under pressure. The first time I told my story publicly, I kept it professional. I explained how internal sabotage can happen where you least expect it, even at home. I talked about the importance of documentation, of following instincts, of trusting procedures. I didn't name Victoria. I didn't need to. The lesson was clear enough. After the talk, a young officer approached me. "Ma'am, I think my brother might be stealing from my company. I never thought of keeping logs until I heard you." I told her, "Write everything down. Treat it like evidence. If you're wrong, no harm done. If you're right, it'll save you." She nodded, her face tight with the same doubt I'd once carried. That night, I realized my experience wasn't just my own. It was a warning, a guide, maybe even a shield for others who would face betrayal closer than they ever imagined. As months rolled into a year, Victoria's trial and sentencing faded from headlines. She became another inmate in a system full of broken people. Titan Strategies collapsed under investigations, their CEO Marcus Grant convicted on federal charges. For me, the story didn't fade. It lived in the corners of my memory, in the scars I carried, in the lessons I taught. I never visited Victoria again. I didn't need her words echoing in my head. I already knew what she'd say, that I was still the golden child, still the reason her life went sideways. The truth was simpler. She made her choice. I made mine. On the anniversary of my promotion, I walked onto base early, the sun barely above the horizon. The flag was being raised, the sound of the bugle crisp in the morning air. I stood at attention, saluted, and let myself breathe in the moment. My uniform fit differently now, not just because of the rank, but because of everything behind it. Honor isn't about medals or promotions. It's about surviving with integrity intact, even when betrayal comes from the person you once called family. That night, I sat at my desk, staring at the Morrison contract on the wall. My phone buzzed with another speaking request, another chance to turn pain into purpose. I typed a quick reply, "Yes, I'll be there." For months, I told myself revenge was about exposing Victoria, about watching justice catch up to her. But sitting there in the quiet, I realized the best revenge was simpler. It was standing tall, wearing the uniform, succeeding without apology. I poured a glass of water, looked out over the city lights, and let the thought settle in fully. The best revenge is living with honor and success, and that I had earned. Looking back, the whole ordeal feels like a battle fought without rifles or grenades, but just as dangerous. My sister thought she could poison my body, steal my work, and break my spirit. She underestimated the one thing the army drilled into me from day one: discipline. I didn't just survive her betrayal, I turned it into fuel. She's sitting behind bars, and I'm wearing a new rank on my shoulder. The Morrison project succeeded, my career advanced, and my life moved forward. That's the difference between us. She chased shortcuts, and I stood my ground. In the end, revenge wasn't about watching her fall. It was about refusing to fall with her.